The silver ship moved silently through the darkness of space, its hull shining like polished metal under the distant light of Earth's sun. Inside the vessel, Ambassador Kethvar stood with his 4 long arms crossed behind his back, watching the small blue planet grow larger through the clear viewing window. His yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the world below. "Another young race to guide," he said to his aide, who was checking readings on a glowing control panel. "Their signals show they have barely learned to leave their own planet. This should be simple." The aide nodded, his own 4 arms busy with the ship's controls. "Yes, Ambassador. Our scanners show they have only basic space stations and a few small ships. Nothing that could challenge even our smallest vessels." Kethvar smiled, showing rows of sharp white teeth. For over 200 years, he had traveled from world to world, bringing the gift of the consortium's wisdom to primitive species. Some accepted gladly, others needed gentle persuasion, but all eventually saw the wisdom of joining the galactic community under proper guidance. "Send them the standard greeting," he ordered. "Mathematical patterns first, then the basic peace symbols. Let us see how quickly these humans can learn." Far below on Earth, Captain James Morrison sat in the command center of the orbital station watchtower, drinking his morning coffee and watching the routine reports scroll across his screen. The quiet hum of the station's systems was broken by a sharp beep from the communication array. "Captain," called Lieutenant Emma Parker from her station, "we're receiving an unusual signal from the outer system. It appears to be some kind of mathematical sequence." Morrison set down his coffee cup and walked over to her station. On the screen, numbers and symbols flowed in neat patterns, followed by what looked like geometric shapes and star charts. "Run it through the translation computers," Morrison ordered. "And get me Admiral Stone on the secure channel." Within minutes, the patterns became clear. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, and basic physics equations, followed by images that could only mean peace and friendship. But something about the signal structure bothered Morrison. It felt rehearsed, like a script someone had used many times before. The communication from Admiral Stone came through quickly. "James, what do we have?" "First contact situation, Admiral. Standard peaceful approach, but something feels off about it. The patterns are almost too perfect, like they've done this exact same thing before." "Probably have," Stone replied grimly. "Keep monitoring and prepare a response. Use Protocol 7. Morrison nodded. Protocol 7 meant a friendly but cautious reply that would demonstrate Earth's technological capabilities without revealing too much. He turned to Lieutenant Parker. "Send back their mathematical sequences, but add our own quantum mechanics equations and some stellar navigation data. Let them know we understand their message and are willing to talk." Aboard the alien ship, Communications Officer Velvar stared at his screen in surprise. The human response had arrived in less than an hour, and it was far more sophisticated than expected. Not only had they decoded the consortium's greeting, but they had responded with mathematical concepts that showed a deep understanding of advanced physics. "Ambassador," Velvar called, "you should see this." Kethvar approached the communication station and studied the incoming data. His 4 eyes widened as he read through the human response. These creatures understood quantum field theory, had detailed knowledge of hyperspace mechanics, and their stellar navigation was surprisingly accurate. "Interesting," he murmured. "Perhaps these humans are more advanced than our long-range scans suggested. No matter. Intelligence often makes species more reasonable." He activated the ship's main transmitter. "Human vessels, this is Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Diplomatic Consortium. We come in peace, seeking to welcome your species into the greater galactic community. We request permission to meet with your leaders." The response came back within an hour, transmitted in perfect Zephyrian mathematical language that made several crew members gasp in amazement. The humans not only agreed to meet, but suggested a location at the edge of their solar system and provided detailed coordinates that showed they understood three-dimensional space navigation better than most species the consortium had encountered. "They learn fast," admitted Navigation Officer Thekrin. "Most species take days to master our language protocols. These humans did it in hours." Kethvar's confidence remained unshaken. Quick learning was actually a good sign. It meant the humans would adapt quickly to consortium guidance once they understood the benefits of cooperation. Back on Earth, Admiral Rebecca Stone reviewed the communication logs in her underground command center. The aliens seemed friendly enough, but their assumption that they would be welcoming humanity into their community suggested they saw themselves as the senior partners in any relationship. "They're being polite," she told Captain Morrison over the secure link, "but their language shows they expect to be in charge. Classic first contact behavior from a species that thinks it's more advanced. Should we show them some of our real capabilities? Morrison asked. Not yet. Let them think we're just clever primitives for now. Sometimes it's better to be underestimated. Stone paused, reviewing the tactical reports on her screen. But have the patrol ships take positions around the meeting point. If these visitors aren't as peaceful as they claim, I want options. As the alien ship moved toward the agreed meeting coordinates, both sides prepared for what they hoped would be a historic first contact between their species. The Zephyrians expected to find another young race eager for guidance. The humans prepared to meet neighbors who might not respect their independence. Neither side fully understood what they were about to encounter, but both were about to learn that first impressions could be very, very wrong. The meeting room aboard the alien ship felt cold and strange to Admiral Rebecca Stone as she sat across from Ambassador Kethvar. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light, and the air tasted metallic. Behind her, Colonel William Hayes and Dr. Margaret Clark sat quietly, watching the alien diplomat with careful eyes. Kethvar looked pleased with himself as he spoke, his forearms moving in graceful gestures while his yellow eyes studied the humans. You must understand, Admiral Stone, that your species is very young. Very new to space travel. This can be dangerous without proper guidance. Admiral Stone kept her face calm, though inside she felt growing annoyance at the alien's tone. He spoke like a teacher talking to small children, assuming they knew nothing about the galaxy around them. We appreciate your concern, she replied politely, but humanity has been exploring space for some time now. We have learned much on our own. The ambassador's mandibles clicked together in what might have been laughter. Of course, of course. Your little space stations and moon bases are quite impressive for such a young species. But there is so much more to learn, so many dangers you cannot even imagine. Dr. Clark leaned forward slightly. What kind of dangers, Ambassador? Kethvar's eyes gleamed as he began listing the threats that lurked in deep space. Pirates who raided trade routes, ancient weapons left behind by dead civilizations, storms of energy that could destroy entire star systems. With each danger he described, his voice grew more dramatic, as if he enjoyed frightening his audience. This is why the consortium exists, he concluded. We protect younger species. We share our technology. We guide them to prosperity and safety. All we ask in return is cooperation and trust. Colonel Hayes shifted in his seat. And what does this cooperation involve, exactly? The alien's expression became more serious. Simple things. You would allow our ships to patrol your space. Your military would work with our advisors. Your scientists would share their research with our experts. In time, your leaders would consult with the consortium before making important decisions. Admiral Stone felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air in the room. Everything the ambassador described sounded reasonable on the surface, but the end result would be the same. Earth would become another client world, dependent on alien guidance for everything important. That's a generous offer, she said carefully, but humanity values its independence. We prefer to make our own choices about our future. Kethvar's friendly expression faded slightly. Independence is a luxury that young species cannot afford, Admiral. The galaxy is not a safe place for those who refuse wise counsel. Are you threatening us? Colonel Hayes asked, his voice sharp. Not at all, the ambassador replied quickly, though his tone suggested otherwise. I simply speak from experience. Many species have tried to go their own way. Most learned to accept guidance eventually. A few did not survive their stubbornness. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Admiral Stone could feel the tension building between the two groups. What had started as a diplomatic meeting was slowly turning into something darker. Behind Kethvar, his aide worked quietly at a small control panel. The device looked like a communication array, but Dr. Clark noticed it was pointed toward deep space rather than Earth. The alien was sending messages to someone, though he was trying to hide it. Perhaps, Admiral Stone said slowly, we should take some time to consider your offer. This is a big decision for our people. Of course, Kethvar agreed, though his yellow eyes showed impatience. Take all the time you need. We are a patient people. But even as he spoke, his aide continued working at the communication panel, sending coded signals into the darkness beyond Earth's solar system. The ambassador might speak of patience, but his actions suggested he was preparing for other possibilities. Hours passed as the talks continued, but neither side was willing to give ground. The humans refused to accept consortium authority, while the aliens grew more frustrated with what they saw as primitive stubbornness. Kethvar's polite mask began to slip, revealing the arrogance underneath. "You are making a serious mistake," he finally said, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of barely controlled anger. "The consortium has guided 17 species to greatness. We have never failed to bring order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. Your refusal to see reason is disappointing." Admiral Stone stood up from her chair, her own patience wearing thin. "Ambassador, humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and countless other challenges without alien guidance. We will continue to survive and prosper on our own terms." Kethvar also rose, his tall form towering over the humans. "Very well. If you will not accept friendship, perhaps you need a demonstration of what protection truly means." The alien's aide looked up from his communication panel and nodded slightly. The message had been sent and acknowledged. Soon, the humans would see what real power looked like. Outside the crystal windows of the meeting room, space looked peaceful and empty. Stars twinkled in the distance like tiny diamonds scattered on black cloth. But in that seemingly empty darkness, ships were moving. Large ships with powerful weapons, heading toward the small blue world that had dared to refuse the consortium's generous offer. Admiral Stone felt a familiar weight in her stomach, the same feeling she had experienced before every major battle of her career. The diplomatic phase of this encounter was ending, and something much more dangerous was about to begin. She activated a small device hidden in her uniform, sending a coded signal of her own toward Earth. If the aliens wanted to play games of intimidation, humanity would show them that too could play that game. The storm was gathering, and neither side was backing down. The morning watch aboard the orbital station watchtower began like any other, with routine sensor sweeps and communication checks. Lieutenant Parker was reviewing overnight reports when her screen suddenly blazed with new contacts. She blinked, thinking her equipment had malfunctioned, then ran the scan again. 12 massive shapes had appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, their hulls dark and angular like predatory insects. Each alien warship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from nose to tail, bristling with weapon arrays that caught the distant sunlight like rows of metal teeth. "Captain Morrison to the bridge, emergency," Parker called over the intercom, her voice tight with controlled alarm. Morrison arrived within minutes, still fastening his uniform jacket. One look at the tactical display told him everything he needed to know. The Zephyrian consortium had decided that diplomacy alone wasn't enough. 12 heavy cruisers, reported scanner technician Davis from his station. Each one mounting enough firepower to level a small moon. "They're holding position just outside our defense perimeter, but their weapons are powered and ready." Morrison studied the formation with the eye of a veteran naval officer. The alien ships were arranged to maximize intimidation rather than tactical advantage. They wanted to impress rather than fight, at least for now. "Get me Admiral Stone," he ordered. Meanwhile, aboard the lead Zephyrian vessel, Ambassador Kethvar stood on the command bridge with obvious satisfaction. The fleet's arrival had been perfectly timed to coincide with the next phase of negotiations. Surely the humans would see reason now. "Open a channel to their orbital station," he commanded. "Let them see what real power looks like." The communication screen aboard Watchtower flickered to life, showing Kethvar's forearmed form against the backdrop of his warship's bridge. Behind him, alien crew members worked at control stations covered in blinking lights and strange symbols. "Admiral Stone," the ambassador began, his voice carrying a note of smug triumph, "I trust your sensors have detected our honor guard. These 12 vessels represent a small fraction of the consortium's naval strength, sent to ensure your protection during our continued discussions." Admiral Stone appeared on the screen from her command bunker deep beneath Earth's surface. Her weathered face showed no emotion as she studied the tactical information flowing across her displays. "Quite an impressive show of force, Ambassador," she replied calmly. "Though I have to wonder why you felt such measures were necessary for a peaceful diplomatic mission." Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a gentle laugh. "The galaxy is full of dangerous elements, Admiral. Pirates, raiders, and worse things that hunt weak targets. Our fleet ensures that no harm comes to your world while we conduct our business." "How thoughtful," Stone said dryly. "Though I should mention that Earth maintains certain defensive capabilities that you may not have observed in your initial scans." The alien ambassador's yellow eyes gleamed with barely concealed amusement. "Admiral, with all respect to your species' achievements, these vessels have conquered worlds with technology far beyond anything your civilization possesses. Your courage is admirable, but courage alone cannot stop weapons that can crack planets." Behind Kethvar, his weapons officer reported quietly that all gun batteries were charged and ready. The ship's targeting systems had already locked onto every human installation within range, from orbital stations to ground-based missile sites. If the humans continued to resist, they would learn the cost of defying the consortium. Admiral Stone's fingers moved beneath her command desk, activating a small beacon that would transmit a coded signal into deep space. The device was completely hidden from the alien sensors, using technology they had never encountered before. "I appreciate your concern for our safety," she told Kethva, "but Earth has faced threats before and survived. We're not quite as helpless as we might appear." "Appearances can indeed be deceiving," the ambassador agreed, though his tone suggested he thought the humans were simply being brave in the face of impossible odds. "Perhaps a closer examination of our vessels would help you understand the situation more clearly." On the tactical displays aboard Watchtower, the alien fleet began moving into a tighter formation around Earth. Their massive hulls blocked out entire star fields as they maneuvered, casting long shadows across the orbital stations and defensive platforms that humanity had built. Captain Morrison watched the display with growing tension. The alien ships were positioning themselves to surround Earth completely, cutting off any possible escape routes. Whatever came next, the consortium wanted to make sure the humans had no choice but to surrender. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Parker from her communication station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups in their weapon systems. They're not just trying to scare us anymore." Morrison nodded grimly. The diplomatic phase was clearly over. Now it was a question of whether humanity's hidden defenses would be enough to protect them from 12 alien dreadnoughts. Deep in space, far beyond the range of Zephyrian sensors, Admiral Stone's beacon continued to transmit its coded message. The signal was brief and simple, but its meaning was clear to those who knew how to interpret it. Help was coming. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Ambassador Kethva felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched Earth's defensive platforms power up their weapons. The humans were finally beginning to understand the futility of their position. Soon they would accept consortium guidance, just like all the others. "Prepare to demonstrate our firepower," he told his weapons officer. "Target one of their outer stations. A precision strike should convince them to see reason." But even as the alien weapons charged for their demonstration, space itself began to ripple at the edge of the solar system. Something vast was approaching, something that would change the balance of power completely. The consortium had made a fundamental error in their calculations about humanity, and they were about to learn just how dangerous that mistake could be. Space itself seemed to tear apart like ripping paper as something impossibly massive dropped out of hyperspace. The fabric of reality twisted and bent around the arriving vessel, creating waves of distortion that spread outward like ripples on a pond. Stars flickered and danced as space-time struggled to accommodate what was emerging from the void. The UES Colossus materialized like a mountain given life and purpose. Its dark hull stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, longer than most alien cities and wider than their greatest battleships. Weapon batteries the size of skyscrapers dotted its armored surface, while shield generators hummed with barely contained energy that made the space around the ship shimmer like heat waves. Aboard the Zephyrian flagship, every alarm in the ship began screaming at once. Control panels sparked and flickered as sensors tried desperately to process what they were detecting. The massive human dreadnought's passive scans cut through their most advanced shielding like it wasn't even there, cataloging weapons, crew positions, and structural weaknesses with casual ease. Ambassador Kethva stared at the main display screen, his forearms hanging limp at his sides as his mind struggled to accept what his eyes were showing him. The tactical readout indicated the human ship carried enough firepower to destroy his entire fleet without breathing hard. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wailing alarms. "No species develops such technology without our guidance. The progression charts, the development models, they all show this is impossible." His aide, Velva, worked frantically at his station, trying to make sense of the sensor readings. "Sir, I'm detecting energy signatures we've never encountered before. Their shield generators are producing power levels that should require the resources of an entire star system." Navigation Officer Thekrin looked up from his station, his face pale with shock. "Ambassador, our long-range sensors are picking up movement in nearby systems. There are at least 40 more ships of similar size heading this way. This may not be their only vessel." Kethva's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his command chair. 40 more ships? The consortium's entire battle fleet numbered less than 200 vessels, and most of those were smaller patrol craft. If the humans possessed a navy of ships this size, they could conquer half the galaxy without breaking a sweat. On the bridge of the Colossus, Captain Thomas Ward stood calmly before the main view screen, studying the formation of alien warships that had seemed so threatening just moments before. Now they looked like toys scattered around a bathtub, small and fragile compared to the massive human dreadnought. Communications, open a channel to the lead alien vessel, Ward ordered, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who had delivered this speech many times before. The communication array crackled to life, and Ward's image appeared on screens throughout the Zephyrian fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady blue eyes, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Earth Defense Command. Behind him, the bridge of the Colossus stretched away into the distance, filled with crew members working at control stations that hummed with advanced technology. Ambassador Kethvar, Ward began, his tone polite but firm. This is Captain Thomas Ward of the United Earthship Colossus. I understand you've been conducting negotiations with Admiral Stone. I trust your diplomatic mission is proceeding smoothly. Kethvar tried to speak but found his voice had abandoned him. His throat worked silently for several seconds before he managed to croak out a response. Captain Ward, we had no idea humanity possessed such advanced vessels. Our intelligence reports indicated your species was still in the early stages of space development. Ward's expression remained pleasantly neutral. Most species make that assumption initially, Ambassador. We find it's often better to let others underestimate our capabilities rather than starting negotiations with threats and displays of force. The captain's words hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The humans had been watching, listening, evaluating the consortium's approach from the beginning. What he had seen as diplomatic strength, they had viewed as crude intimidation. Admiral Stone, Ward continued, his image shifting to show both the alien ambassador and the human admiral on split screen. Are our guests causing you any difficulties? I noticed they brought quite a large escort fleet for a peaceful diplomatic mission. Admiral Stone appeared on the communication screen from her command bunker, her expression as calm and professional as ever. Not at all, Captain Ward. Ambassador Kethvar and I were just discussing the terms of our future relationship. I believe we're making excellent progress. Kethvar's 4 eyes darted frantically between the 2 human officers. The Admiral's tone was perfectly diplomatic, but her meaning was crystal clear. The consortium had overplayed their hand, and now they were completely at humanity's mercy. Captain Ward, Kethvar began carefully, his voice shaking despite his efforts to remain calm. Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding about our intentions here. The consortium seeks only peaceful cooperation with your species. Of course, Ambassador, Ward replied smoothly. That's what Admiral Stone reported to me. Though I have to admit, bringing 12 heavy cruisers to a diplomatic meeting does send mixed signals about your peaceful intentions. The alien diplomat's mandibles clicked nervously as he realized the full scope of his miscalculation. These humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had simply chosen not to reveal the true extent of their capabilities until they were threatened. Now, faced with overwhelming force, he found himself in the position he had expected the humans to occupy. We meant no threat, he said quickly. The ships were intended as an honor guard, nothing more. I'm sure they were, Ward said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Well, now that we're all here, perhaps we can move forward with productive negotiations. Admiral Stone, shall I remain on station to observe these historic talks? The massive form of the Colossus hung in space like a silent promise, its weapons powered down but ready. Around it, space itself seemed to bend and flow, as if reality recognized the presence of something truly formidable. The atmosphere in the meeting room aboard the Zephyrian ship had changed completely. Where Ambassador Kethvar had once lounged in his chair with casual arrogance, he now sat straight and rigid, his forearms positioned carefully in what his people considered a gesture of deep respect. The crystal walls that had seemed so impressive before now felt fragile and small compared to the massive human dreadnought visible through the viewing ports. Admiral Stone sat across from him with the same calm expression she had worn throughout their talks, but now Kethvar understood that her quietness had never been weakness. It had been the confidence of someone who held all the important cards and was simply waiting to see how the game would play out. Ambassador, Stone began, her voice carrying no trace of triumph despite her complete victory, I believe we may have started our relationship on the wrong foot. Perhaps we should begin again with a clearer understanding of our respective positions. Kethvar's yellow eyes darted nervously to the viewing port where the Colossus dominated the star field like a dark mountain. Yes, Admiral. I fear there have been serious misunderstandings about both our people's capabilities and intentions. Dr. Margaret Clark, who had remained silent through most of the previous negotiations, leaned forward with genuine curiosity. Ambassador, if I may ask, how many species has the consortium encountered that possess technology similar to ours? The alien diplomat's mandibles clicked together in what might have been embarrassment. In our 2,000 years of expansion, Dr. Clark, your species is the first we have encountered with such advanced capabilities that chose to hide them during first contact. Colonel William Hayes raised an eyebrow. Hide them? We simply didn't see the need to show off. Most reasonable people can conduct negotiations without bringing battleships to the table. Kethvar winced at the colonel's words. His own fleet of 12 warships now seemed like children's toys compared to the single human vessel that hung motionless in space nearby. Worse, Captain Ward had mentioned at least 40 more ships of similar size in nearby systems. You must understand, the ambassador said carefully, the consortium has always operated under the assumption that advanced technology requires guidance to develop safely. We have seen too many young species destroy themselves with weapons they couldn't control. Admiral Stone nodded thoughtfully. That's actually a reasonable concern, Ambassador. But perhaps the solution isn't to control other species' development. Perhaps it's to help them learn wisdom along with power. What do you mean? Kethvar asked, leaning forward despite his nervousness. Dr. Clark smiled slightly. Humanity spent centuries learning to control our own destructive impulses. We fought terrible wars, nearly destroyed our own planet several times, and had to learn the hard way that true strength comes from restraint, not from the ability to destroy. The alien ambassador studied the three humans with growing fascination. They possessed weapons that could shatter worlds, yet they spoke of restraint and wisdom. They could have destroyed his fleet in seconds, yet they chose to continue talking. Your development path is unlike anything in our records, he admitted. Most species that achieve this level of technology become aggressive, seeking to dominate others. You seem to have chosen a different path. Not chosen, Colonel Hayes corrected. Learned. There's a difference. We made our mistakes, paid the price for them, and grew wiser. You can't teach that kind of wisdom, Ambassador. It has to be earned. Through the viewing port, they could see smaller human ships beginning to arrive at the edge of the system. Unlike the massive Colossus, these vessels were sleek and fast, clearly designed for exploration rather than war. Their arrival sent a clear message that Earth's response had been measured and proportional. Admiral Stone, Kethvar said slowly, if the consortium were to approach humanity as equals rather than as a species requiring guidance, what would that relationship look like? Stone considered the question carefully. We would welcome trade, cultural exchange, and cooperation on mutual interests. We're always eager to learn from other civilizations, just as we hope they might learn from us. And if conflicts arose between our peoples, we would handle them the same way we handle conflicts with other human nations, she replied. Through negotiation, compromise, and mutual respect. Violence would be a last resort, used only in self-defense. Kethvar's aide, who had been quietly monitoring communications, looked up from his station with surprise. Ambassador, I'm receiving reports from our other first contact teams. Several species we classified as primitive have revealed advanced technologies after our fleets arrived. The pattern matches what happened here. The ambassador's four eyes widened in shock. How many? At least 6 systems, sir. Possibly more. The reports are still coming in. Admiral Stone exchanged glances with her colleagues. Ambassador, it seems humanity isn't unique in preferring to keep our capabilities private until we understand who we're dealing with. Kethvar slumped in his chair as the full scope of the consortium's error became clear. For centuries, they had been approaching other species with arrogance and threats, assuming that advanced technology meant they were superior. Now it appeared they had been making enemies when they could have been making friends. We have made a terrible mistake, he said quietly. Not just with your species, but with many others. We assumed that because we developed openly, all advanced species would do the same. Dr. Clark nodded sympathetically. It's an understandable error, Ambassador. But perhaps this is an opportunity to build something better. The galaxy is vast enough for many different approaches to civilization. Outside the ship, the Colossus began powering down its weapon systems, though its massive bulk continued to dominate the local space. Other human vessels took up positions around the diplomatic meeting, not as threats but as escorts, protecting the historic negotiations taking place. Admiral Stone, Kethvar said formally, rising from his chair, I would like to formally request that the Zephyrian Consortium and humanity begin negotiations for a treaty of mutual respect and cooperation between equals. Admiral Stone stood as well, extending her hand in the human gesture of friendship. Ambassador, nothing would make us happier. Welcome to the community of civilized worlds. As they shook hands, both leaders knew they were witnessing the beginning of a new era in galactic politics, one built on respect rather than fear.